Morning. Welcome to another exciting episode of Speak Your Piece. Yeah, it's not that exciting, is it? But back to the reality for a second. Um, on today's episode, we're going to talk about something a little bit more close to home, I guess. Um, we're going to talk about the overall effects of how struggle in our society has reshaped how we think, how we view things, how we see people, and how we see our own personal realities. If you've noticed over vast centuries, over vast decades, struggle has been the main focus for all existence within how we run ourselves and how we live, breathe, and move about our lives. Um, and within those struggles, there have been maybe a few maybe larger dynamics of struggles and smaller dynamics of struggle, but struggle has always existed. It is something that is conducive to growth because many people believe that without any type of struggle, you cannot move forward through life, you cannot succeed, and you have to struggle through life in order to succeed. You can't go through life on easy mode. At least that's the thought process. Um, it has not been proven that you can wake up and succeed. It has not been proven that struggle is always a dynamic when it comes to succession. But the reality is that somewhere along the line, you have to go through some type of difficulty where it can't be too easy, but it has to have some level of difficulty to where you have to overcome it. There has to be a ebb and flow. It has to be a height or a low where you have to get to struggle, to get where you got to get to. And that's going to be your struggle. Whether it be in any field, regardless of what that field may be, and regardless of what the case may be. Maybe sometimes we struggle with how we're moving about our lives and trying to get things more, balanced. Maybe we struggle with the overwhelming ideal of failure that makes us struggle. Our own personal views of how we go about our lives, which make us struggle. Our own little inside voices that make us struggle. It's a whole bunch of things which may, be the catalyst for our struggles. But I think right now, in this moment, in this day and age, as we're living right now, our struggles are far beyond personal. They fall under the weight of political struggles, societal struggles, emotional struggles, family, friends, children, all of that. It's falling under the same umbrella because the dynamic has changed. There is no balance. There is no, cohesive assistance amongst the culture. We have become, our own little separate entities, our own little separate individualities to where we feel like we have to be selfish. There's nothing wrong with being a little selfish every now and then, but when does being too selfish become a detriment to where it affects the entire culture and societal construct? Where do we draw the line? Where does it end? And I think the discussion should be how can we go about changing so that struggle isn't so difficult for the next generation? Think about that for a second. Each generation has had to overcome the past mistakes of the others. And the one generation that seems to be leaning more towards struggle and succession is Generation X, which is me and some people who are my age. Yes, I'm showing my age. But we have lived within the realm of struggle, but we've also been able to advance as far as when we were the first ones introduced to this technology, to the realities of this new generation. We were the first ones to witness it. We watched it come about. We in its infancy, in its inception, we saw it all come about. We watched it come to fruition from being an idea to an actual fact, to an existence. But yet, many of our children coming up in this what do they call millennials and alphas and yeah, they look at us as being, the complainers when we don't say anything. We don't, because we allow them so much leeway, because we didn't have any leeway. We had a controlled and conformative environment when we grew up. You either adhered to it or there was, literal and proverbial hell to pay. But we also learned something from that. We learned how to function as a society through our differences and through differential cultures and aspects. I think that sometimes the generational gaps can be filled, but both sides have to be willing to discuss it. Um, there is no real easy outlook for anything, but you at least have to try. And my thing is, while the majority of things that are given throughout these new generations are a lot easily accessible, a lot of times easy access doesn't mean it will provide you with success that you think you're going to get. There has to be a difficulty. There has to be a difficulty setting. You can't wake up and go, I'm going to be this and it automatically happen, or I'm going to be that and automatically happen. There is a hill to climb. There is a wilderness to cross. There is a desert to make a path through. There is an ocean to sail. It's everything. There has to be some level of difficulty. You can't run through life thinking, oh, everything's going to be handed to you. That within itself is delusional, because nobody's going to hand you anything. And if they do, they're not teaching you anything. If you're going to hand somebody the keys to the car and they don't know how to drive, that's your fault. If you're going to hand somebody the keys to the plane and don't know how to fly, that's your fault. There has to be some teaching in this. There has to be some type of cohesive thought process to where somebody's learning something and taking it and passing it down. Generational knowledge should be the key. Not generational wealth. Generational wealth is material. Generational knowledge. I'm talking about ancestral knowledge from every generation, passed down from one to the next to the next to the next. There used to be a thing like that. And I'm not saying we need to go back to that, but I still think the ideal itself is sound. We need to reconstruct our thought process so that knowledge that we possess, that we learn from our family members, and that generation, that knowledge needs to be passed down. Generational knowledge should be the key. Otherwise, we got a whole society filled with, academia with no common sense. We have to at least try. Because sometimes the smartest of us are not the wisest of us. And that's something that needs to be discussed. So, with that said, like I said, like, subscribe. Let me know what you think. This has been Ronnie Q. Speak your piece.